Hi, it's Michael Kerr here, presenting Small Business Banter. A healthy micro and small business sector means a successful economy and a more vibrant society. Small Business Banter is about helping regional business owners better prepare for current challenges, but also for the next stage of business success. I'm Michael Kerr, founder of Kerr Capital, advisors to business owners. Each week, I interview a fellow small business owner or an expert, and they share their stories, their lived experiences, the wins and the losses, and their best advice to help you, the listener, get the most you can from your own business. Small Business Banter is brought to you from the studios of 104.7 Gippsland FM and is heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network. And thanks also to Kerr Capital, supporters of the show. Welcome into another edition of Small Business Banter Community Radio and Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the role owning and running a small business, a small community business, how important it can be in the life of an individual and a family. Lloyd Polkinghorne was a farmer, but a traumatic workplace brain injury turned his world upside down. Over the next couple of weeks, Lloyd opens up on the reason for buying and operating the Bridge newspaper, which services Barham and Kundruk, and talks about very personally about why it was so vital for him, for his family, and for his recovery.
Yeah, I suppose the newspaper, owning and running a newspaper, was never really on my radar. I was after leaving high school, I actually became a diesel mechanic and worked for a Caterpillar dealer. Repairing sort of earth moving and on highway trucks. And then, after that I went home to the family farm and so we started going through succession planning and I'd purchased some land and part of the business and had started going down that road, sort of got quite involved with industry groups and other aspects of our community. And then in 2013, I actually had an accident on the farm and ended up with a brain injury, a traumatic brain injury, after a shotgun failed in the course of normal farming activities. That really turned my life upside down. And, it put me on a long, twisting journey of discovering, how am I going to make myself better and where I wanted to end up.
Yeah, well, that's how I initially reached out to you. I read this story and, it was very personal, but also fascinating from the point of view, and you'll tell us a lot better than me, but you've ended up as a proprietor of the Bridge newspaper, which covers Barham and the surrounding districts. But I think the newspaper that you bought and now still own is something like 150 years.
It'd be at 113, so started 113. Started in 1909. It's the Kundruk and Barham Bridge newspaper, so it spans both sides of the border of our bit of northern Victoria and southern New South Wales.
Yeah. So this, do you want to go? So now the proprietor of that was in farming until this traumatic accident. The period between having that accident and ending up buying, I think by your own words, a business you didn't have a lot of experience in. Can you talk about that period briefly and why choosing to buy a business in an industry that's you didn't know much about was what you thought was the right thing to do at the time?
Yeah. So. Prior to my accident, life was very hectic and very busy. My wife started her own real estate agency and I was farming and involved in industry groups and things. And then after the accident, sort of everything just stopped. So it took a long time to work out an actual diagnosis. in the
We're
first.
talking years and years here.
Yeah, yep. So in the initial, like I went to the doctor about 5 times in the first 10 days and saying to them, something's not right, I don't feel right, because after the accident I sort of went home and I didn't feel well. And then, just laid around in bed and wasn't feeling right. And every time I'd try to do any work or stuff, I'd sort of start to pass out or get nauseous and start vomiting. And so, I was going to a doctor. We had to travel about 70 kilometres to the GP. I went there about 5 times in 10 days, just saying, something's not right. I don't feel right. I think there's something going on. And he kept telling me I had a nasal infection and would trying to give me antibiotics. And I sort of said, well, I'm pretty sure it's got something more to do with the gun that exploded on me. But anyway, we persevered, and eventually I'd been to a few GPs, but none of them could sort of answer any questions. And then gradually I started to deteriorate. I started to get quite ill. And then one night I had some discharge down the back of my throat, which turned out to be cerebral spinal fluid. I'd ruptured a membrane from a nasal passage sort of into my brain. And so that discharge was actually CSF fluid. And so I opted to try a different doctor. So we drove 100 kilometres to see one that I'd sort of used during my teenage years. And he took one look at me and said, something's really not right. You should go to Bendigo and get checked out. So my wife took me to Bendigo and we sat in emergency for 4 hours, and then they decided there was nothing they could do and told me to go home again. So we went back. And I was getting quite bad by that stage, and she took me to her mother's in Barham because we were living in Moolameen at the time on the farm. And then anyway, and then I was only there for a day or so and decided to go back to the doctor, and he put me straight into hospital in Kerrang. And like by that time, I was really uncomfortable. My ears had stopped regulating noise, so I was hearing everything like flat out. So I couldn't understand, and I couldn't stand ambient noise. I also had quite an aversion to light, so I was getting these constant headaches and migraines. And so they put me into hospital, and then I was laid up in bed. They basically try to get you to lay flat so the membrane heals and you don't put too much pressure on it. So I had a stay in hospital for a few weeks, and then went home. But life was basically just existing.
Were you concerned? Were you also? You've had a work ethic, so you also got the complication of what get kind of thinking about your farm and your business while you're trying to recover, and maybe getting some conflicting advice, and that that must have been an added layer of complexity.
It was. We'd finished cereal harvest, but rice harvest was coming up, and I also did contract harvesting as well, and we'd sort of
so hard working.
Yeah,
hard work ethic.
Yeah, so we did winter cropping and summer cropping as well as a merino sheep operation. So there was always something happening, and so we should have been irrigating for winter cereals and getting the ground ready and getting ready for harvest and undertaking that. And I'd sort of the wheels had completely fallen off me.
Right.
So it was quite I think a lot of my identity was, tied up in who I was as a farmer and working hard, and you sort of never went to the doctor unless you had a limb falling off or something. So it was.
Lloyd, it's such that thread of that conversation around identity and purpose through a business or a role or a job comes up all the time.
Yeah.
And we recently had a discussion with a with a business psychologist from the US who focuses on better understanding the role that identity and purpose in business plays and how to manage it coming up to the, when it's the natural time for that individual to move on and do something else after business, and, identifying it and working with it. It's different for everybody. Yeah. So it's, there's a lot of the work I do is around helping owners get ready to sell and then ultimately sell. But that personal part that you just talked about is kind of gets largely left unexplored because, but it's such a important influence on the success of for the individual as well as for their for their business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, growing up on the farm and being in a family farming operation, and it forms for me, it was quite a core part of my identity or who I thought I was going to be. And then not being able to undertake that and also, carry the load that I should have been. That was quite challenging. But my health just kept deteriorating. So I gained like 50 kilos in 12 months. I had shocking night terrors, have dreams every night about, kids getting killed in the most brutal way and trying to save them. And so I developed post-traumatic stress and quite a lot of depression and anxiety and all these other things that were going on. And it was also hard for my family members who were in the business because, it was something that there was no label attached to it at the time, or they couldn't work out what was going on. And you're all expected to carry your weight.
With it.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. To put your head down and, just soldier on. So, and then, we had two small kids. So, one of our daughters was just starting school and my wife would travel 70 k's each way to work. And we both sort of are active within the household. So, we share jobs because we both work and quite prepared to work as a team. But, and then everything sort of fell to her. She sort of became primary parent as, I was basically bedridden. And anyway, I started to question a lot of things in my life and my values and my purpose and who I was and how I was going to improve. I tried a whole range of weird and wonderful things and specialist after specialist after specialists. And it really, that's quite disheartening at times. Like, I know doctors and specialists would see a wide and varied range of people and, some of them may be less genuine than others. But, like I had one bloke who, said, we think you're depressed because you're overweight. And I was, and he tested my hormones and I had no hormones. And he said, I think your hormones are low because you're depressed and all this stuff. And you come away from that going, is it me? Is there, am I just not sucking it up and getting on with it? And,
God, that is, it's like a vortex, isn't it? Like you know something's not right, but you knew something wasn't right. And it's kind of saying, well, it's caused by the concern you have over worrying about it or the side effects. It must have been awful.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but I think there is a part within yourself that something's not right, and I think you've really got to listen to that intuition and follow that along. And the real answers came. I was actually interviewed by Landline about my accident and things, and then I had a bloke ring me from down in Mornington and he said, just listening to you and looking at you on telly, I think you should go and get your hormones really checked because he had an injury as a jockey. He got kicked by a horse and so I followed that. And and then they found out that I had no testosterone and I had no growth hormone and all these other things associated with a damaged pituitary, and they found out my thyroid wasn't functioning as well. So there was some substantial reasons why I wasn't functioning and wasn't able to get going.
Yep.
But yeah, that was 4 years in, so it it was a long 4 years.
That's so taxing on everybody, you, your family. We might. I think it's probably not a bad time to 4 years in. I can't imagine, but then there was this moment, and we might just start to talk about that. But on today's edition of Small Business Banter Community Radio podcast, talking with Lloyd Polkinghorne, proprietor, is that owner of the Ridge newspaper in Barham and Kundruk. So, so 4 years down, Lloyd, at what point did you start to think about, maybe it was after getting some direction in terms of your medical challenges, but did you, I'm really deeply fascinated as to how and why you ended up, running a community newspaper that's got a heritage of 100 and something years. So can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, so we ended up, I was advised to move into town and be less stressed to try and help my brain recover, and then we were approached, the paper was up for sale, and someone approached my wife to see if we wanted to buy it. My health was on the improve. I wasn't to the stage where I could run it, but I thought, there's a team in place there, and I really missed being involved in the community and also community advocacy. Our areas have been through a lot of sort of government forced changes, and that's been quite destructive to employment and industries broadly through our region. And I thought the newspaper was a good opportunity to dip my toe back into getting involved, to represent our community and hero the things they do well.
Yeah, and so who approached you? Was it the owner of the?
There was a real estate agent. Had approached my wife. He was his son-in-law owned the paper at the time, and so. There was
a sense that because of your profile community advocacy that you might be someone who would understand and be able to take the business forward? I mean, because it's like if you don't have a pub, if you don't have a servo, and somewhere in a newspaper's one of those key pieces of the infrastructure. So they see something in you.
I think they saw that my wife was one of the major advertisers with her real estate business, and they went, well, maybe you should just buy the paper to go along with it. So I don't know whether there's a bit of stardust or divine intervention in how I ended up in it. But, it's certainly been...
Well, that makes a lot... I often think when you pick up Saturday Age, you see Harvey Norman's got... if the paper's 100 pages, like 30 of them are... I go, wouldn't it be cheaper for him just to, buy the newspaper? Probably gets a pretty good deal, but yeah. So tell for you then, how did you process that? What did you out of the blue? Someone's kind of given you the opportunity or potential opportunity to go and buy a newspaper. What did you do next, and what were you thinking at the time?
So at the time, the newspaper had dwindled a bit, so it was down to like 8 to 12 pages, and so I don't know. It sparked a bit of excitement in me to see what we could do differently and where we could go from where it was. It wasn't online, and didn't really have a social media presence or anything, and so it just seemed like a really good opportunity to go and try different things. And because I'm not traditionally from a media background, you've always got to be adaptable as a farmer and think outside the square. And so that for me, was interesting, and I was prepared to get in and give it a go. So.
Yeah, so it sounds like a few business instincts kicked in as well, right? kind of the eyes lit up. There's stuff that you saw wasn't being done, but wasn't, in inverted commas, wasn't rocket science to add a social media presence. But there's always a reason why, because people, the past owner is busy or just at a different stage. So it's never a criticism, but it's good that you were able to see opportunities. Was your wife, she kept running the real estate business, and you kind of, how was day one, in the chair as editor and owner?
Yeah, well, so we maintained the current editor for a while. They were sort of in the role, and then I was writing little bits and pieces. And then, she decided to have children, and so she left on maternity leave. And then my sister ran it for about 12 months, and then I got to a stage where, I thought I was ready to step into the role, and my sister wanted to go and try something else. So, it all gravitated, at the right place at the right time. And
Yeah.
it's been
The process. Can you talk about how the process from getting a tap on the shoulder to handing over, whatever the commercial terms were. Like this is if you were kind of thinking about it from the point of view of other people interested in buying a business, what did you learn through that process of buying?
So we'd had other businesses before, so there was, setting up a company name and going through that process. We had we've got a really good relationship with an accountant who supports us in so many facets of our life as well as our business.
Right.
So I think that's a super valuable relationship.
If you got a good advisor who can do the technical as well as understand it through your sort of personal lens, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and then there was understanding, well, what is a newspaper and how does it function and how does it operate, and what are your income streams and what are your expenses and where do you get it printed? It was a great learning experience for me, and I think the first 12 months we bought it, one of the printer we were at closed. They shifted us to somewhere else, and then they closed that facility and we had to go to somewhere else. So, there was these challenges that presented themselves through that time. But, and you certainly learning, advertising is such a crucial part of newspapers and sustainability in that regard. It's quite a competitive marketplace with so many, things moving online, even local news and stuff. There's quite a tendency for things to go online first through Facebook or other platforms.
Yeah.
A big one we've found is, government advertising. So they quite often go social media now or online, and they seem to forget about rural communities. Like quite a large proportion of our community is elderly, and they're not on Facebook and all these other technologies, and so they actually rely on a weekly paper to get that sort of local news.
Yeah, and it's something that they pick up in the local, at a local place, a cafe or something, and that's all. That can be part of a ritual of, go and get your mail and get shopping or whatever. And where I live in Queenscliff, we have the Queenscliff Herald, which changed hands, I think 2 years ago, and the Herald, it goes back, well more than 100 years.
Yep.
And you can just see how it's, I wouldn't say blossom, but it's just changed under new ownership, and but it's around on racks in certain places, and it's a buzz to pick it up and have a look.
And it does form a real part of people's routine. I mean, we print 50 papers a year, and we stop for 2 weeks over Christmas, and I always get people ringing up complaining, that they've been thrown out because the paper's not there on the Thursday, so it's I think it's an incredible opportunity and privilege to be able to continue on the local paper and something that people enjoy.
Yeah, well, and that's, part of the fascination for me in that particular, your story, but also coming to this business is with all that heritage of 100 and something years and the importance to some people carries a bit of weight. It's very. I do a lot of work in regional areas, and there's there are recently did a series on co-ops and mutuals, and almost my favourite topic. But the Sea Lake Pub became community owned out of necessity.
Yep.
And so these are core parts of what makes the communities vibrant and sustainable. And so that where do you see the come back to your particular? I'm really want to draw out some of your business thoughts and experience, but community newspapers. I think you said you're one of the. There's not that many independent ones left. Where's that heading? Given social media and given, community radio and TV seems to have a bit of a resurgence going on, but I'm interested in community newspapers or local newspapers. That's where we're going to have to leave our very personal and rich discussion with Lloyd Polkinghorne. What a champ. Very open with what he went through following that very traumatic accident. So you can tune in next week. We'll pick up the conversation again with Lloyd on the next step of his recovery through the business known as the Bridge newspaper. So that is all for today's episode of Small Business Banter. I continue to be inspired bringing you small business experts and other small business owners and hearing their stories. If you want to listen to any past episode, jump onto your podcast platform of choice and search Small Business Banter. There you will find a diverse and fascinating collection of small business owners and experts openly discussing and sharing their experiences. For any of the links, resources or information we've talked about on the show today, or to contact me, please head over to smallbusinessbanter.com, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And it would be great to have you tune in the same time next week for another episode of Small Business Banter.